to the FASD Training for Justice. I'm Angela Kemble, the Executive Director of Northwest Central FASD Network. This is the FASD training piece for staff for our InReach program that we bring to your facility and several other facilities in the Edmonton area. FASD stands for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, and the InReach program that we developed here at Northwest Central is to meet the needs that we've discovered in the justice facilities for FASD training, prevention, assessment, diagnostics, and support. So we first developed this program in 2017, and with it we do annual staff training, which is what this is. We also do sharing circles with the residents with FASD awareness and prevention. We offer assessments and diagnostics through a grant from Edmonton Community Foundation and the Status of Women Canada. We also offer support in facility through our InReach worker, Yvette Krejci, and out of facility by connecting individuals suspected and diagnosed with FASD to the 12 networks across the province. As I've mentioned, we're Northwest Central. There are 10 other geographically located networks, and then there is one for Métis settlements as well. And we consider it part of our job to ensure that people who have gone through our sharing circles and are suspected and diagnosed with an FASD do receive the contacts necessary for FASD supported accommodations in their communities via these networks. So again, FASD is Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder. Under that umbrella term are 3 diagnoses that a person can receive: FASD with sentinel facial features, FASD without sentinel facial features, and at risk for FASD. So FASD is caused when a woman consumes alcohol while pregnant, and that alcohol passes the placental barrier at a 1-to-1 ratio. Alcohol is also known as a teratogen, which is a toxin that can harm a growing or developing fetus. There are several other teratogens out there that you might recognize. Thalidomide in the 70s was one. Accutane, which is an acne medication prescribed by doctors, is another well-known one. Some illnesses also can be teratogens and cause defects in a forming fetus. So fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, as mentioned, can cause facial features. Now keep in mind this only happens in about 10% of the population of people who have an FASD. So it's a very small number of people who have these visible facial malformities. And without those facial malformities, most of the time people with FASD just look like you or me. And you're not going to know that somebody is affected with an FASD until you get to know them a little better and realize that there's some maybe behavioral issues, some comprehension issues that speak to something going on in their brain that's a little bit different from what's going on in your brain. Now back to those facial features. Those can only occur on around the 19th, 20th, 21st day of pregnancy, and if mom consumed alcohol on those days. So again, a very small window. That being said, FASD is often ruled an invisible disability, because again, you can't see. They look just like you and me. The last diagnosis at risk for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is given to people who were diagnosed or had gone through assessment and they didn't hit enough of the markers in the diagnosis to be considered as having an FASD at this time. What the multidisciplinary team usually does is have that person back in a few years to see how they're doing and to see if any of the damage that may have occurred to the brain is now showing itself, because the expectations put on that person have increased. So for instance, if somebody goes through assessment at around 6 or 7, they might come out with an at-risk because we know prenatal alcohol exposure occurred. However, they might not be having any difficulty until they hit about puberty and the expectations of those nonverbal cues that people give off when socializing, or the ability to have relationships with the opposite sex are a problem. Those type of things. Another thing are abstract concepts such as time and money. People can be having difficulty with those later on, and those are signs that there is brain damage in that area. But they might not, again, show up until the expectations are put on that person for them to be expected to understand about time and money. So that at-risk diagnosis usually is on that person until they get reassessed. And then more often than not, they wind up with either FASD with facial features or without facial features. One of the things I mentioned is prenatal alcohol confirmation. We shorten it to PAE, and that is something that we absolutely need to move forward with an FASD assessment. FASD can mimic a lot of other disabilities, or it can just go, it can just be considered that that person is bad, or doesn't listen, or, oh, they have a poor memory, or they're just not academically smart, or they're just never on time for anything. So it can be pushed to the side as something else quite easily. So we would not put somebody through an FASD assessment and diagnostic clinic unless we had prenatal alcohol exposure confirmed. We get prenatal alcohol exposure generally from the biological mother. It has to come from mom's side of the family in order for us to avoid any legalities that may arise if it came from dad's side of the family. Now, sometimes biological mom is not in the picture. She's either passed away or she's just not available, hasn't been in the child's life, for instance, if they've been adopted. So we just can't find her. So if we can't get the confirmation from biological mom, which we always try and do if she's available, we can look at speaking to members of mom's side of the family around her at the time she was pregnant. If two of those people can confirm that mom was consuming alcohol at the time of pregnancy, that in itself is prenatal alcohol confirmation. Another avenue we can take, not as successful, is going through birth records, adoption records, social service records if they've had child welfare involvement. Until recently, most professionals didn't write down that alcohol was being consumed at the time of pregnancy. It just wasn't seen as something that was important or notable to write down. It is getting better. We've got a program called Prevention Conversation where we do a lot of training, including medical professionals and other professionals in the human service field, that how important it is to document these incidents, because that can help in, say, 10 years' time when that child is starting to have some issues and maybe birth mom can't be found. And so it's very important for them to write it down. However, at this time, we don't have a lot of success with that. Another key aspect of prenatal alcohol exposure confirmation, it's a tricky conversation to have with the biological mom. So we ask that the people who have the relationships closest to her, be it a social worker, be it someone such as yourself that has a relationship with the resident, to be the one to have those conversations with mom and ask her about that prenatal alcohol consumption while she was pregnant. Again, not an easy conversation. However, it is more successful if somebody who has a close relationship has that conversation. However, we are there for support. Yvette is more than willing and able to walk you through some different pointers that can help you be successful in having that conversation and ensure that you're coming off as a caring and compassionate, having these intrusive questions asked in order for her benefit and not just because you want to expose her or blame her or judge her in any way. One of the things I'd really like to drive home is the fact that no woman consumes alcohol because she wants to intentionally harm her child. Again, that is why the approach of asking these questions is so important. So for most cases, the women that we come across did not even realize they were pregnant at the time they were consuming alcohol. 50% of pregnancies are unplanned. Therefore, if the woman doesn't know she's pregnant and she's consuming alcohol, how can you blame her? On top of that, women who do consume alcohol while pregnant often don't even realize that alcohol is a danger to their fetus. FASD is a relatively new disability. It's only been around since the 70s. It certainly hasn't had the social awareness that some of the other disabilities have had. Until the networks were formed in about 2008, there was really no huge campaign on increasing social awareness of FASD. So there are lots of people out there that still don't know what FASD is and that alcohol is a danger to an unborn child. So these women just didn't know. And last, women who are having issues, either they're addicted to alcohol or they are using alcohol to self-medicate because of some former trauma or current trauma that they're going through. Regardless of why a woman is drinking, it is not to intentionally harm her child. So approaching that woman with no judgment is very important, and approaching her with an understanding and a desire to help her and her either unborn child or the children that she's already had is definitely the approach to take in order for that woman to get the help she needs, and in turn for her children to get the help they need. So lots of talk about alcohol. It's out there, it's very available, and it is socially acceptable. One of the things that is a misconception for a lot of people is what is a standard drink. A standard drink for wine is 5 ounces, yet in most restaurants are going to offer you 6 or 9 ounce glass, some even 12. A standard drink of whiskey or rum is 1.5 ounces. So most of the time when you go to a party at a friend's house, they don't have a shot glass there, they don't have a jigger on the bottle, they free pour. And majority of people do tend to free pour. The only ones that use those shot glasses and jiggers are bars who are looking to save financial costs. So chances are when you pour your average rum and coke, you're not pouring 1 to 1.5 ounces of alcohol, you're pouring more likely 2 or 3. And on top of it, if you're not using a typical highball glass, you're most likely going to over pour. One of the neat things that has come out is the red Solo cup. The red Solo cup, and I've got an example actually right here, has lines on it to tell you where to pour a standard drink. Bottom line is for hard alcohol, whiskey, rum, vodka. The next line up is a 5 ounce drink of wine, which is the standard drink for wine. The next line on top of that is for beer, wine coolers. Most of those are relatively easy to do because they come in bottles, but sometimes you can buy your coolers in a 2-liter pop bottle, so this helps you manage to pour yourself a standard drink. Anything above that, well, that's supposed to be for your Coke and your water. It's not supposed to be for more alcohol. So that will help you and the people you work with understand better what a standard drink is. It's very important to know what a standard drink is, because a binge episode of drinking is considered 4 drinks or more. So a woman who has had 2 binge episodes while pregnant is more likely to have a child that is impacted by fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Also, a woman who drinks regularly, even a drink a day throughout a pregnancy, has a higher risk of causing FASD. So those 4 drinks in that binge episode, it's important that they're standard drinks, because if they're not standard drinks, chances are they're more than a standard drink, and the woman has already reached her limit of binge drinking at 1.5 to 2 drinks. But in her mind, she's only had 2 drinks. Another thing I'd like to point out is alcohol is alcohol. So whether it comes from Bailey's and a cup of coffee, or whether it comes from a bottle of vodka, it's still alcohol and still affects the body the same way, and is still going to affect the fetus the same way. So there is no wine and beer are better than rum. There is none of that. So if you're out there and you're pouring Bailey's in your coffee, that counts. So make sure that you know how much you're drinking and do things safely, like don't drive, plan your pregnancies, so on and so forth. There is a lot of responsibility on the males and partners in your lives as well to ensure that you are having standard drinks, and that if you are pregnant, that other things are being offered besides alcohol. So lots of support there will help a woman have a healthy pregnancy. So now I'm going to pass this over to Donna Kristiansen, who's a program manager for InReach, and she's going to talk to you about clinic, how a clinic looks in facility, and talk about what an FASD offender may represent as or may look like in facility.
Hi everyone. First of all, I'd like to take a look at some of the clinic team members. We have our core team members, but it looks different for pediatrics and adults. For pediatrics, we have the difference of the SLP, or the speech language pathologist for children, and we have the occupational therapist for adults. Speech language is looking at more of the learning skills in relation to school and learning ability and going through that. And speech, receptive language, expressive language, things like that they can pick up a lot of information on how well the child is doing cognitively and in related to the speech aspects. For adults, we look at the occupational therapist. And the reason we're looking at that is we're looking at some of those other skills, those motor skills, those social or life skills, when we're looking at, budgeting or fine motor skills, being able to, like some of the tests are related to looking up phone numbers or memory and things like that. So they, between the psychologist and the occupational therapist, they've kind of put their reports together so they kind of enhance each other's, and so they try to get a full, robust assessment, an FASD assessment for the individual. Of course, that's included with the medical piece as well. So we have a physician for both the adults and the pediatrics. The pediatric clinic team is more mobile, so we might have assessments that could occur on our west zone or our north zone or our central zone, and that helps so the families do not have to travel as much. When we look at in-facility assessments, it looks a little bit different compared to assessments that would occur outside of facility. In facility, we have to be considerate of the security measures, of scheduling, of the security checks that are required, and just maybe some limitations on who would be able to attend for that individual during that clinic. Our clinic coordinator is integral in that assessment piece where she's doing all the scheduling and making sure that the room is available for those assessments to occur. And so those are the ones that we consider for that. Occasionally, when we're looking at individuals in facility, we could see, is there an elder or say somebody from who's doing some case management that would be able to be part of that a team that is there during the assessment. Now we're going to look at what is assessed, so the domains for assessment. So we've got 10 domains that the individual is being assessed upon, and when we're looking at evidence or part of our FASD to get a diagnosis, they have to be 2 standard deviations below the average. So, and there has to be that in 3 different domains. And when we're looking at 2% or 2 deviations, it's like, well, what does that look like? Well, when we're looking at that, it would be an average of about 2% of the population that would be below that 2 deviations. So when we look at those pieces, that's pretty significant to be only 2%, and in those 3 areas. So it's not like, well, how much does it take to have an FASD? It's pretty significant. And then that's why we look at the importance of having those supports, because if we've got somebody who has those 2 standard deviations, when we're looking at either motor skills or executive functioning and memory, at only 2%, that's very significant, and we can see how they would have challenges in many areas of their life because of that. Now, next we're going to look at some of these primary disabilities. Now, as you can see, there is a lot of areas that are covered in there when we're looking at reasoning, attention, IQ and intelligence and cognitive skills. And when you put some of those together and we look at some of those learning disabilities or primary disabilities, how they impact sensory integration. And what does that actually look like? It could be the lights. Sometimes when we have, many places we have fluorescent lighting, and how that impacts if you're able to try to concentrate. If sensory integration is an issue for somebody, then maybe if the lights are flickering, they can't even focus on a conversation, so they're just thinking those lights are flickering, and so their attention is drawn somewhere else. Another thing that we look at is that executive functioning, and that's like that air traffic control with all the information coming in and how our brain is able to disseminate that information and put it into meaningful context. And so when we look at, I kind of compare, the rest of us maybe have those highway of how our brain is working, but somebody who has maybe impacted with FASD, theirs is more like a gravel road. So it doesn't mean that they can't learn a skill, but it may take time to learn that skill. They might be learning it a different way. So we have to be considerate of that. And look at that executive functioning. And that's where the supports come in and the skills and the strategies come into play. So we're looking at what are the best strategies that we can help this individual in some of these areas. Is it repetition for learning? Is it more, if they're not, say, can read material and be able to absorb the information that way? Is it more hands-on skills that we're going to be looking at and how they can do that? Another thing is we have to recognize that FASD is a whole body disorder. We have many individuals that not only have issues cognitively or executive functioning wise, but we also have the physical pieces. Many individuals don't realize that maybe it's a thyroid issue as well, and there's other physical issues, whether it's your heart. Because when we look at a developing fetus, if alcohol is being consumed at any time during pregnancy as that fetus is developing, any part of the development can be impacted with alcohol. Another thing that we want to say is like, what you see is not what you get. So we see an individual, his actual age or her actual age is 18. Expressive language, there doesn't seem to be issues. So it's not like you're going to recognize right away by how they speak or the conversations that they're having. And that's just the first one-off. Like say if you're meeting them as a service provider like income support or in a medical office or whatever, when you have that conversation, like even physicians, you're not going to notice right off the bat that there's something going on there. But then when you look and start building that relationship or get to know that person a little bit better, then you're starting to see some of those other issues like reading. Like many individuals that we work with, sending texts back and forth, not a problem. They're able to do that easy and communicate. But what they're communicating might be the issue. We look at the living skills and having the expectation that as adults that they should be able to hold down a job, that they should be able to manage an apartment, they should be able to pay their rent, they should be able to budget and make sure that they have all these things in place. But it's when we see that the individuals that have an FASD we start to recognize that there's something going on here. But are we looking at as they can't or they need to have that support, or that, oh, they're just doing because they don't want to pay their rent, or, you know, having some of those other excuses of looking at it in a negative manner instead of saying, well, maybe they need a little bit of help with that. How can we develop some strategies to help them so that they're able to have that support to make sure that their rent is paid on time? And so we've got those services that are available, like for Asian, that third-party agreement, that's automatically the rent is taken off their ACE check, which is a huge difference because automatically that rent is paid. They don't have to worry about, they don't have to remember that the first of every month that the rent has to be paid, or that they've overspent and there is no money for rent. That automatically comes off first, so that's a really good strategy. When we look at social skills, you know, we're looking at an age 7, or the concept of the money and time and things like that. And I always ask the question, would you expect your 10-year-old to be able to manage a household and or to manage, you know, holding down a job and things like that? And often it's no, you know, so that's why we have to really look at the individual and where they are in that area. The next thing we look at is some of those adverse outcomes. And when we see somebody that's fallen through the cracks repeatedly from the time that they were, 5, 6, 7 years old, as the expectations raise and they're not meeting that bar, then we can see like the mental health problems and the feeling of like knowing like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do these things like everybody else? So then we get some of that mental health and some of that depression, that isolation. We often see, especially as children, as they mature, they have all the friends when they're in like 5, 6, grade 1, grade 2. But as other children may mature and be able to have some more of that independence, these individuals don't mature at the same pace. So they kind of fall behind in relationships and those social skills that other children acquire. An individual who may have an FASD are not going to reach that same pace. And so you can see how that isolation, and then it comes into the place as they mature into adolescence and into early adulthood. It's almost like they want to have a sense of belonging. having friends, being able to relate to people. So often what happens is they can be exploited and more susceptible to whether it be gang affiliation, but it's a point of being part of something, being part of a group. We would try to recommend maybe that'd be better if they could be part of a Catholic congregation or something like that, but that doesn't necessarily work. It could be some of those gang affiliations or being the guy, well, can we keep some of these TVs and stereos at your place because we don't have room, and not recognizing that they are holding stolen goods. And then that's how we kind of trickle down into the justice system for many individuals because of that exploitation, whether it be illegally that way, also what comes apart with the depression and the poor mental health is addictions. And so we have that piece as well. So being involved with justice issues through those addictions and some of those actions that occur, unable to make some of those good decisions. And I think for anybody, making decisions when you're intoxicated or high are not typically good decisions. But with the FASD and possibly the addictions as well, they can get themselves in some serious justice issues. And then when we talk about the whole body disorder, and we talk about the physical issues, along with the physical issues that somebody may have, poor mental health, addictions, maybe being a risky lifestyle, they have a shorter lifespan because of those many issues. And we have some stats on that it's significant. And actually there was a study a couple of years ago by individuals who are impacted by FASD, who started to recognize some of their physical issues and how that impacted their life and their well-being. Another thing that we want to look at, if we look at all those stats, of a lot of individuals are having some of that significant challenge with education, with employment, holding down jobs. And we find with support, yes, many individuals are able to get the jobs, but it's keeping the jobs. But with the support and having that great communication, whether it be with an employer, with their supports that they have, to help ensure that they're able to get to work on time. What's the expectations? Often we find that they're able to get the job. And what happens sometimes is it's like, well, that person does such a great job, we're going to give them a promotion. And we're either going to give them additional skills or additional tasks, or we're going to change their position to something else. And that transition may not be easy for that individual. They become overwhelmed and they're not successful. So we want to be able to have those supports in place so they're be able to have the communication so that they know what their job entails, what the skills are, what the time is, what are the strategies. Can we set an alarm clock to make sure that they're going? Can we send a text? Can we do a reminder the night before? All those types of things and the strategies to help the individuals we work with become successful. So who is the FASD offender? Well, as you can see, we have a long list of many of the barriers, the challenges that the individuals face and have gone through. And so this is not just all of a sudden everything was great one day and all of a sudden they committed a crime or became involved in the justice system. And we've had other projects that have shown the importance of having support to go through the justice system. And with those supports, how it's able to prevent that recidivism. We look at the trauma that many individuals have gone through and the fact that they have those addictions, are self-medicating, they have poor mental health, and it's just almost like a domino effect, or just that castle, that house of cards come tumbling down, and it's all these different factors that impact who our FASD offender is. And it's not that nobody wants to say, well, when I grow up I want to become a criminal. It's all these different things. So it's not like they wanted to go down this path. It's just all these things that have impacted them, whether it's having trauma in early life. Maybe they were in a home where there was some neglect, abuses. Maybe they've gone into care, which is all those changes of typically what many, we don't want children to go through. And so all those pieces impact, it relates on how their trust issues are and their executive functioning to make those decisions. It's all impacted. And it's just a lack of positive supports in their life, because often those bridges have been burnt, whether it's from bad decisions, with addictions, with mental health, all those pieces impact who they are. And then we look at, like I said before, with those negative school experiences, impulsivity. So maybe somebody suggested to, whether it's jump in a car that didn't belong to them or something else. It was not thinking of the consequences of, well, if I do this, what's going to happen next, right? If I do this, is this going to be a good decision or is it going to be a bad decision? So it's some of that impulsivity that gets them into the issues. The poor memory. Now we have those breaches that come. So say if somebody has been charged and then they're supposed to appear at court or they're supposed to meet with their probation, but when we have those memory issues, are they meeting? Did they lose a piece of paper or the contact information? Do they know where to go? Some of those aspects is that they don't recognize that until they're picked up and taken back and have to deal with those breaches. So when we look at some of these pieces, we want to be able to say, okay, what can we put in place to prevent some of these breaches from reoccurring or some of these things? And we look at plain language papers and in regards to probation and things like that. And it's like being able to simplify that language. And that's when we go to the communication. And so when we look at that communication, and we're able to recognize, okay, does this individual have an FASD, or even if they don't, it's being able to slow the language down. So instead of speaking really, really fast or at that pace, it's being able just to slow it down so that gives the individual some processing time to take some of that information in. And then you also want to be able to see if everything is comprehended. So it may say, do you understand everything that I said? Because they might get a response of, yeah. Or can you word it in a different way and say, so what are your plans and what you want to do, or what are you going to do in order to follow this goal, and kind of put it back so that they are able, that you're recognizing, do they understand, or can we word it in a different way? So that there's that comprehension, and at that point, at least we can help lay out some steps. So that concrete language, and using those open-ended questions, and that's where you're getting some of the information back. And I don't think it would make, even if the individual did not have FASD or some type of brain impairment, even if you ask this to anybody, it's not looking as if you're viewing them as having that you're assuming that they don't understand, but it's just getting that clarification that they do understand.
Thank you, Donna. So one of the things I'd like to ask, just out there, is as Donna was talking, did some particular people's faces come to mind when she was talking about that poor memory, that inability to be on time for things, that repetition of the same mistake over and over again, giving a direction to somebody and them not being able to follow it, even though to you it seemed so simple? Those all could be signs that you're dealing with something more than just somebody who is a 23-year-old. It could be a 23-year-old with an FASD who has some severe brain damage in 3 domains or more. We have had people come through our clinic who are severely impaired in up to 9 of the 10 domains. We're talking severe brain damage here. So you don't get an FASD lightly. If somebody is diagnosed, you are dealing with somebody who has a severe disability. Doesn't mean there's no hope. It means that they're going to require some supports and accommodations in order to be successful. One of the goals with the InReach program is to, again, bring the FASD awareness, prevention, assessments and diagnostics to people who need them and their children, supports in facility and outside of facility, with the overarching goals of reducing recidivism. People with FASD, chances are they are going to make those mistakes again. However, when we say reduce recidivism, we're hoping to slow down that revolving door of going in and out of the justice system just slowing the revolving of the door so that instead of every 3 to 6 months you're seeing this person, maybe it's a year. Maybe they can go for 2 to 3 years this time without tripping over themselves. And that's going to save you a lot of work, it's going to save the justice system a lot of money, and it's certainly going to save that person a lot of heartache. It's also going to improve their self-esteem immensely, and with those continued supports, that recidivism time gets longer and longer. And all in all, people who leave the justice facility and do have supports, the communities that they're going back to are going to be safer. So they're not going to be committing the crimes as often. So those communities that they're residing in are going to be safer. And those people that are their caregivers and their families and friends are going to be safer as well. One of the key things with the InReach project is the sharing circle. Now the sharing circle involves residents, usually anywhere from about 10 to 15 residents. In some facilities they're much larger, in other facilities smaller. Again, we have that flexibility to accommodate to that facility's needs. One of the goals of the sharing circle is to really create a safe, comfortable space where everybody feels equal, and the chances of them opening up and engaging are much higher. So we like to find a room that's comfortable in the facility for the men or women who are coming. By the way, we have female sharing circles and male sharing circles. We don't do co-ed. And once they come into the room, it's set up in such a way that it's comfortable. The chairs are in a circle. Sometimes Yvette, who's our InReach worker, will show a PowerPoint presentation. Sometimes she won't. It really depends on the feeling she gets from the circle. But what we do is ensure that FASD information is passed along, FASD prevention information is passed along, and then open it up to lots of questions and answers and letting the women tell their stories. The whole point of that is for them to become comfortable enough with the vet that if they do suspect that they have FASD, or if they suspect their children might, then they'll develop a relationship with a vet that has them comfortable enough to approach her and ask for an assessment. Because with an assessment leads greater knowledge as to themselves, why they do the things they do, with supports and strategies about how to make some changes in their life. Get a path of new direction, so hopes that they become healthier, are more successful, are less likely to wind up in facility. Another thing an assessment does is enables her or him to access supports. Donna mentioned AISH, Alberta Income for Severely Handicapped. Many of the people that go through an FASD assessment are eligible for AISH. And because often people with an FASD can't hold down a job and do have issues with housing and money, AISH can be the difference between going to jail and staying out of jail, the difference between having your children at home with you or having your children in care. So it can provide some stability, some financial stability for them to become healthy enough to continue to access supports and hopefully continue to stay out of jail longer. The sharing circles are FASD sharing circles. They are not considered the traditional Indigenous sharing circle unless the facility is able to provide us a knowledge keeper or an elder to co-facilitate with a vet. If they are able to, we love that. We think that's fabulous. However, that's not always possible. So they are FASD sharing circles. The ideal situation, again, if an elder or a knowledge keeper can't be available, then a member of the facility themselves can co-facilitate with a vet, and this increases the capacity of the facility for FASD. That way, if a vet can't come in, or we're not able to get into the facility anymore, maybe our program doesn't have funding anymore, then that particular individual can sort of be that FASD expert in that facility, so the information and the knowledge isn't lost. Another aspect about sharing circle is it's very important to do it on a regular basis. Women and men can come to the sharing circle again and again, which really helps with the relationship building piece. Majority of our facilities let us come in monthly. Some facilities, due to programming cycles, have us come in every 6 weeks just for their programming cycle. Others already have programming that this FASD piece fits in nicely with. So we look for different ways to get the program in a way that suits the facility best. It doesn't have them rearranging their entire schedules around us. It has us accommodating to their needs. Sometimes we can even have bi-monthly sharing circles, which just decreases the amount of time required for a vet to build those relationships with those residents for them to feel comfortable enough coming forward and asking for that assessment. Another key thing with this relationship building is that if the women are comfortable approaching a vet to do a referral, if there is not somebody in the facility that can sit down with them and fill out that referral, a vet can come down and fill out that referral with them. It is a rather long process. We do require the prenatal alcohol confirmation. Again, that is usually best achieved by somebody who knows that person. However, a vet is at your disposal as part of this program to help fill out those referral forms and do some of that legwork. So one of the things we would really like to see with this training is a shift in attitude toward people with an FASD. I'm not saying that the attitude you currently have is wrong. All we're asking is that you incorporate some of this knowledge into that attitude so that when you think about somebody who is doing some of those odd behaviors or forgetting things or repeating the same mistakes again, not to look at it or take it personally and have yourself get aggravated about it, but look at it through a different lens as not so much that they won't do something, it's that they can't do something. Now we all know that there are times when people do intentionally do things to take you off. However, if you approach it with this FASD lens, and for most of the time it's not that they're doing it to upset you, they are doing it because they're frustrated, because they have low self-esteem, because they don't understand what you've asked, because they can't remember something and they might be feeling stupid. It could be something that happened hours ago that they're just now processing, and their emotions and stuff are coming out several hours or even several days later. So really important to approach them with I see you're upset. What are you thinking right now? What's going on for you right now? Approaching them with a non-judgmental attitude, with a caring attitude, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on for them. Because as you saw in that one picture, what you see is not what you get. And just understanding that FASD is brain damage, it is lifelong, it is not curable, but it can be managed through caregiver support, through a deep understanding of FASD, through somebody giving the assessment, and being able to see where the areas are for them that they need more help, more accommodation, and getting the support specifically for those. So one of the things that comes out of an FASD assessment is recommendations by the multidisciplinary team of different things that can be done to help this person be successful. So approaching a person with FASD with that in mind, that maybe I need to do a little more on my end to help them out. Maybe I need to have a bit of a deeper conversation about what's going on with them to figure out how best to help them, instead of just taking things black and white or as they seem. Thank you for joining Donna and I today. The InReach program is available to your facility if we're not already in there, and there are several branches of the project that you can utilize. The only one that is mandatory is the annual training before you take on the sharing circles or the assessment diagnosis or the support piece. With that, I'd like to conclude with some contact information. Again, we're Northwest Central FASD Network. I'm Angela Kemble, Executive Director. You met Donna, Program Manager. And our InReach worker is Yvette Krejci, and she will be at your disposal via this phone, via this email. And if you lose this information, you can always reach out to us at www.nwcfasd.ca. Thank you for your time.